Hi guys, Dr. Chloe Costigan here from Mobility Doc. For week 2 of the Backbend series, we're going to do another triple that's going to focus on camel pose. For camel pose, we are going to do a flexibility exercise, a stability exercise, and then finally a strength exercise. For the first exercise, you're going to do a low lunge quad stretch. This is going to be really helpful for improving flexibility through the front of the hip in order to get you into camel. Then for the second exercise, you're going to do crab rocks. Crab rocks are going to be helpful for making sure that your shoulder is stretched out enough, but then also you're integrating a little bit of glute activation as well as thoracic and shoulder extension. Then for the third exercise, you're going to do hip lifts. These hip lifts are going to be really helpful for focusing on glute activation in that hip hinge exercise, and it's going to look really similar to camel as well. This low lunge hip flexor and quad stretch is a great way to get a deep stretch throughout the entire hip flexor and quad, because it does a combination of hip extension and knee flexion. So let's get started. You're going to first start on all fours. Then I'm going to bring my right foot to the outside of my right hand, and I'm going to walk this left knee back. Because what I'm trying to do is that if I'm stretching this left hip flexor, I'm trying to get as much hip extension as possible. So already I'm going to squeeze my glute on this back left leg, and then I'm going to bend this knee. Now with my right hand, I'm going to grab the top of my left foot. So I'm pulling this in pulling my heel in toward me. You see how I kind of want to do this? As much as I can, I'm trying to get full hip extension to be able to get that full stretch. Now I can use gravity to kind of help me to try to bring this front part of my hip down toward the mat as much as I can. Crab rocks are a great way to get both glute activation as well as a shoulder stretch, and it focuses on making sure that you are extending through your thoracic spine, getting a lift through the chest. So let's go over this. So I'm going to start first with my fingertips pointing out to the side. You can make it a little bit easier or harder depending on the position that your hands are in. But the thing though that I'm really prioritizing is making sure that my biceps are pointing forward. So I'm not turned in like this. As much as I can, my biceps are turned forward. With my fingertips out to the side, this is a little bit easier. Then I'm going to press through my hands to kind of lift my chest. I'm not bringing the bottom ribs forward. I'm actually trying to lift my chest up as much as I can. My feet are going to be about hips distance apart. And then I'm going to press through my heels and the ball mound of my foot to lift up and then come back down. So as you kind of continue, you'll feel a little bit of kind of what you need, right? So you need to be able to lift that chest up as much as you can without just overarching the back. And then as I'm pressing through my hands, my shoulder heads aren't coming forward like this. They're trying to be pulled back as much as I can. Then I'm trying to get full hip extension as well by pressing through my feet to make sure that I'm opening up right at that hip crease. These glute hip lifts are a really great way to focus on isolating that glute activation, glute and a little bit of hamstring activation, as well as reinforcing a hip hinge pattern. So let's explore this. So it looks like this. So I'm coming up and down. Now there's actually a lot of parts to this in order to make sure you're actually activating right through that glute and hamstring. So the first thing is isolating this motion so you're coming just from your hips. So in order to do that, I need to focus on pressing my shins into the ground, press the tops of my feet into the ground. If you can't start in this position, make sure to put something underneath you. But as I'm coming up, I'm focusing on leading from my hips first. So I really need to, as I press my shins up, that's what is bringing my thigh forward, and I'm extending right from this front part of my hip. What I see happen most frequently is people will do this. I'm exaggerating it, but they're leading with their chest, with their spine first, and then they're straightening. I want you to think about staying as upright as you can as you bring your hips forward and then back down. The other thing that happens is people will keep their knees kind of out to the side as they come up. And what's going to happen is that could potentially lead to some SI joint irritation because I'm in this externally rotated position. As much as I can, I need to try to keep my femurs pointing straight forward, and I'm almost kind of thinking about wrapping my outer thigh toward my inner thigh to make sure that I'm just getting pure hip extension and I'm not externally rotating. I'm not kind of bringing that inner thigh toward that outer thigh. So as I come up, I'm really focusing on connecting right where this glute and hamstring meets, and I'm almost trying to think about like pushing it down toward my heels. So it's like so right now they're like physically touching, and now I'm trying to squeeze my glutes, and I'm trying to like almost like push my heels away as I come up. So then that way I can focus on making sure that I'm getting this extension just through my hip. For each of these, you're going to, for the stretch, you're going to hold for 30 seconds. Then for the second exercise, you're going to do 10 repetitions. And then for the third exercise, you're going to do 10 repetitions as well. And you're going to do a total of 3 rounds. The camel pose lift ups are a really great way to focus on integrating those hip lifts that I previously discussed in a video with the actual pose of camel as well. So for the camel pose lift ups, I'm going to start with my hands on my heels, and then from the bottom I'm going to come up into camel. So I need to think about keeping my chest as lifted as I can. So it's almost like I'm kind of like pushing off of myself just to start. So I'm keeping my chest as lifted as I can without arching through my lower back and kind of pulling these ribs forward. So I'm here, I'm making sure that my shoulder is on the side of my rib cage, so it's not pulled forward. It's staying on the side of my rib cage. Then I'm gonna press through my tops of my feet and my shins to bring myself up into camel and then back down. So I'm just kind of exploring this motion. So I'm gonna come up and then back down. So what I need is simultaneous hip extension as I'm getting thoracic extension. The other thing though too is like I'm getting shoulder extension at the same time. So it's a ton of extension. So what I suggest is making a little bit of a checklist. So if I need to make sure that I'm prioritizing this hip extension, I need to think about, okay, this is what I'm starting with. I need to squeeze right where my glute and thigh meets, and I'm opening up where that pocket is. So you see how, like when I'm already back here, I'm already really trying to extend my hip as much as I can. And then I lift my chest up toward the ceiling to pull myself forward a little bit more, and then I'm getting shoulder extension. So I like to prioritize first hip extension, then a little bit more thoracic extension, then finally shoulder extension. That's what's going to make sure that you're getting in that position, because the main driver of the exercise is through hip extension. So you're going to do camel lift ups for a total of 5 repetitions, and you're going to repeat that 3 to 4 times. This moving in and out of camel is going to be really helpful for making sure that you're going through that checklist and really making sure that you can fully extend your hip, that you can get as much thoracic extension as possible, and then as much shoulder extension as possible. Make sure to like and subscribe to the Mobility Doc YouTube and share with your friends, and let us know what you think.